Hi everyone, we got a special bonus episode for you today. Our executive director, Emil, was recently featured on a podcast called Progress Reimagined, where he sat down with the host Kathleen for a great conversation. Emil and Kathleen dive into the challenges of digital organizing, the need for secure and user friendly tools, as well as how decentralized technologies can help protect and sustain activist spaces. It's a thoughtful and very timely discussion, so you don't want to miss it. So please tune in and don't also forget to follow Progress Reimagined for more great episodes. We will be putting all the details on the show notes, so make sure to check those out. Thank you very much and please enjoy.
Welcome, Emil.
No, thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you so much for welcoming me and also actor to the show. And also thank you for exploring these different themes of how can we reimagine society. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. First of all, if you don't mind, just quickly introduce yourself.
Happy to. Currently based in Denmark, and my role in actor and has been the last couple of years is executive director, as you mentioned. I guess what's more important is what brought me here to actor or co-founding actor now almost 7 years ago. So I think in my most of my adult life, I've been kind of wanting to explore ways to sort of use my time on Earth to see how I can be part of contributing to pushing society and the world in a direction that I hope to see. And so that also included being an activist and being involved with activism for several years. And it was kind of through organizing and being part of movements and local groups that we kind of understood, or I also experienced together with my friends and my network, that the tools that we're using and relying on, especially the digital tools, really were shaping the way that we were organizing, not only within our movement, but also came to coordinating across movements, solidarity. And all of that led essentially to see we acknowledge that the digital tools that we use today are really vital, critical infrastructure for success as a movement and as a civil society. And as long as we rely on tools and digital platforms that have other motives, which I'm sure we'll get into, it's hard to really fully unleash the potential and power that we have as civil society. So that was kind of the kickstart to Actor in trying to change that landscape. Beyond that, I have a brief sort of academic background. I never thought I would take education, but I took sort of a bachelor called Chaos Pilot, which works a lot around and shaped my thoughts around kind of thinking in systems. Maybe I'm not sure if that's an episode for itself in terms of what system thinking is, but essentially how to be a part of driving change. Now an actor, as mentioned, where I'm responsible for partnership development and also a little bit of fundraising, which is obviously a vital part to make sure that we can drive Actor forward. Very excited to be here. Thanks so much, Kathleen.
Thank you. Thank you. If I may ask, what is that one thing in your field? So I guess in that sense is activism or social movement. What is that one thing in your field that many people believe is true, but doesn't really hold up under scrutiny?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's two things that comes to mind. An overarching one is obviously what is activism, and especially to your question, when some people think about activism, it's someone that's standing with a brick in their hand, throwing at the police, and sort of very much radical actions. Where I think one of the things is to speak about activism not as only for selected people or those who have nothing to lose, but really, I think as someone put it at some point, activism is really like when resistance takes shape, it becomes activism. So, and it doesn't have to be resistant against things, it can also be for something. We kind of define activism as being very broadly a way that you're taking direct action on changing things that you want to see in society. It's obviously value driven, but it can be everything from locally things related to climate change. It can be, human rights. It can be better psychological safety for kids. So there's many ways and shape that activism can take form as well. It can be demonstrations. It can also be education. So there's many shades of what activism is. that I think is important to establish. And then I think the second one, then when we speak about activism and also in the field of digital tools, I think especially in the global majority and the global south, where security is quite a big thing, there sometimes can be a belief that security is the most important thing. And although that is definitely true to some extent, what we see it's in sort of in practice, it's actually not always kind of like the thing that has come on top, but rather usability and accessibility. So we are so much like habit people that we love to continue what we've been doing. We like to use the same platforms because we know where the buttons are. We've been using it. Why change? If it ain't broken, don't fix it. So we actually still see a lot of movements and activists still being more at risk than needed because they still choose to rely on centralized or proprietary software as a solution because it's convenient and maybe also usability, to all respect, is better, which leaves them vulnerable for security. So I think that's also one belief that that not always is true in terms of security being the most important thing.
Back to the first point you mentioned, I can really kind of resonate with how people usually associate activism with protest, violence sometimes, because that's what you tend to see on mass media from TV, which is really not true, right? There are many forms, and I think very few people kind of are aware of other forms, which you mentioned a great example, which is education. And I think that is so important in today's world because there are so many different informations, and education, it builds the foundation of everything. Point, I actually didn't quite get it. If you don't mind, just explain it again.
Definitely, I'm happy to elaborate on it. And just quickly, like a comment to the first thing, I think maybe we'll dive into it a bit more as well. Activism, more than ever, it's so important to protect. And why I say that is because with the rise of authoritarian regimes, not only isolated to countries in the global south, but also now, as we see in the West and with the new US administration, where suddenly one of the weapons that is being used by authoritarian regime is to make activism kind of almost equal sometimes to terrorism, right? It's radical, yes, disturbing peace, disturbing society, and also like trying to use the same laws that applies to terrorists to kind of silence activists. That is important point to make, that I think it's more important than ever to kind of really how to enable more people to get into activism and not necessarily like go on the street, but also understand what is your role in kind of like shaping society from the ground up. So that was one comment. And to the second one, just to clarify, I think so ACTA is really focusing a lot on co-creation, right? So we have spoken to hundreds of movements and an organization, civil society organization, and really understanding, okay, what are like kind of the core needs that they have, especially when it comes to organizing as a movement, also pulling from our own lived experiences. And security is especially for movements that operate in authoritarian regimes, or for example, it can also be LGBTQ plus movements that operate in countries where queer rights is illegal, it's legal to be queer, and where the lives at risk. We kind of see obviously security being such an important piece and about the work. But still, despite that, sometimes choosing platform that, for example, are not encrypted,
right,
that doesn't have a lot of digital hygiene around them, because it's where people are. So I think that is one of the things that we understood, to kind of like, it's believed that it's always, and people are willing to prioritize that over everything else, but it's not always the case.
That's right. That is so true. Like, it's hard not to be one of the major tech platforms, social media platforms these days. And it's hard to enforce change through that, because there's so much noise. And in case of some platforms, there are a lot of bots, and it's hard to tell who's who, and whether you're talking to the actual human being, or a bot. Thanks for elaborating on that. Maybe we can dive a little deeper on this, how to enforce change in today's world, because social media and the need for connection, especially when you want to build up, when you want to create a movement, and it's hard to kind of imagine, because we have lived, I don't know about others, but I feel like we've been kind of living a pretty peaceful world for the longest time, but things are changing now, and things are changing at really fast pace. If you can share a little bit about how you think about the systems change in today's world, when people seek connection and they also want to see the changes that they think matters. So how do you think about that?
So like the interrelation between kind of systems change and the whole kind of social media tech
Yes.
space. Yeah, so I think, I mean, first of all, just a quick note also too, in terms of like, the state of the world and how it was before. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of things happening in the world today, increasingly. I'm not sure, like, if it's necessarily like it was more peaceful early on. It might have been, but I think a part of why also we're seeing so much now that there's so many. There's the term called, like, the poly crisis, right? So it's like the multiple
Yes.
crises, like the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the human rights. But I think also part of that is now what has been really good about social media is suddenly the voices that has been silenced or are not covered by traditional media suddenly have a voice, and people are able to talk about what's going on in Sudan right now, or what's going on in Turkey right now, or what's going on, in Malaysia or anywhere else. So I think sort of uncovering things that actually has been going on, but we just haven't known about, in the West or the rest of the world. So coming back to your question around sort of like, the interconnection between kind of driving system change and sort of the use of digital tools and platforms. Social media can be really effective as a kind of like bullhorns in terms of drawing, almost like kind of public squares, right? Like looking at them as a public square where you can draw a lot of attention to something for amount of time, right? So the good thing is it can go really quick, it can go viral, but obviously also the next day there's a news story that then suddenly goes viral, and things can sort of like then lose momentum, and was there then really like a change? Was that change happen? And I think that sometimes what can be discussed with the terms of like collectivism or selectivism, not to say that they don't have a role, but especially those terms coming from, yes, today I went to Facebook and I liked all of these posts, or I changed my profile picture to show the rainbow colors. So I've kind of like done my part in sort of engaging into the world as a responsible citizen. Where is that going to drive kind of fundamental change or transformational change? Obviously not by itself. And I think that is one of the things that we are seeing in the public spheres of Twitter and now Blue Sky and others, are definitely important to drive attention, to mobilize people. But in terms of organizing, so with Actor, we're kind of also sometimes making a distinction here, even though they're very interconnected, between mobilizing and organizing. So mobilizing, especially social media, is really great at what we call like the one-to-many conversation, right? So you have a couple of people that talks to a bigger audience. And also social media, for the most part, there's a very few people, basically, if you look at comparison, that is actually the content creators, and then a lot of people that are reading. Where with organizing, what you want to enable there is the many-to-many communication form, where essentially it's retracting from these more public squares into smaller spaces, more intimate space. Because if you want to drive kind of sustained change, and over time, you need to build a community, you need to build a movement, and a movement is only strong if there is also trust, if there is relationships, and that you're there for each other. And that is I won't even say difficult. I think it's impossible to do in social media because it's just one big square. So that's where we need kind of the more closer spaces, or the more intimate spaces, where you can actually organize, where you can, create more decentralized, autonomous, sustainable structures that also doesn't rely only on one or two people. But even if they were to exit the movement, the movement would still sustain. And I think that's also part of, when it comes to activism, and especially also burnout, that because everything is volunteer driven into civil society, things are also more volatile, because then suddenly someone who could do it like a lot of times suddenly get a new job, or they become a family, or they get a family, and suddenly they have to pull back. And so there's a lot of kind of change happening compared to like a company where you have everyone is full-time employed, there's a CEO. So that is again where kind of like the digital tools are playing such a vital role in creating structures that allow for that sort of continuity, and allow sort of for like a movement to build those structures, that it's okay if Emil or Kathleen steps out for weeks or a couple months, because there's a clear structure that people can find the information they need. Then they kind of quickly can get an overview of who's doing what and how to engage, as an example.
I think now is a great timing to get into what actor is, and what's the problem that actor is trying to solve, and what is actor offer that others don't. I think you mentioned a lot about why an app like Actor is needed. If you can share a little bit more about that.
It's always the golden question: what is Actor offering that no one else is offering? Actor is a mobile first encrypted organizing application focused on supporting movements, groups, volunteer organizing in terms of how engaging members, organize campaigns, distribute basically responsibility. So you have end-to-end encrypted conversation. You can create events. So, okay, when is our next meetings within our movement? You can assign tasks, create to-do lists. So who's doing what by when? You can create updates so people can separate sort of the noise from the day-to-day chat. Most movements rely on what we call instant messaging apps, which is WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram. If you kind of move a bit further, it's also include like Slack and Discord. All of them, for the most part, are based on chat as the main medium for exchange, for coordination. Imagine if a company had to only use, a WhatsApp group for organizing their work. I mean, it would be chaos, right? So that's why we have developed project management tools. We have Asana, we have Monday.com, we have big suites, we have like Microsoft Teams, we have Google Workspace, all to kind of like improve organizing. But civil society is kind of left with these tools that have been developed for chatting with the family or Discord for gamers, not for actually the organizing action that is really trying to push the agenda on the climate crisis, on human rights. Yes. So that is really one of the core pieces we are really tackling with Actor, is like the organizing capacity and enabling people to not only use chat as the only medium, but again, to know what's going on within our movement. As the Bernie Sanders campaign is like, what you want to enable is to have a centralized plan, but decentralized action, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone knows what we want to do, but we have sort of like structure that allows anyone to go out and start local chapters. So I think that's one of the things also with Actor, is that you can organize with spaces. So typically movements, especially the ones that are growing, they will have maybe a national chapter, then they will have local chapters, with each of them having the local projects and campaigns. But in the end, all of them are still interconnected. But the ways that current, tools are made, you have maximum 1 to 2 levels of organizing. So on WhatsApp, you can now create a community and then you can have a chat within that. But that is the maximum layers you can organize. Where with Actor, you can have Emil's amazing movement, and then you can have, Emil Copenhagen, Dubai, Nairobi. And then with that, you can have further local groups or campaigns, and all of them can be interconnected if you want to, which allow again for a new ways of organizing. That is, in terms of functionality, really like one of the core things. We also focus on security. We make that as a default, that of course Actor and the conversations are instant encrypted, because we're dealing with movements and people that are driving change also in restrictive regimes. There's a lot of other things that we work on next to that, which also include sort of like a protest mode. So when people are opening up the Actor app, we're soon deploying that it opens up as a calculator, for example. So if you're in a protest, the police looks at your phone, forces you to look at your phone. It would just open as a calculator and work as a calculator. But if you type in the right digits, it actually opens up the app. And what we're working to figure out also, if the police maybe still knows that, you can type in the wrong numbers on the calculator, which opens up still the app, but as a clean slate rather than actually your conversation and events. There's a lot of things that we really try to co-design together with the activists, understanding the threats, which also comes into the whole threat model scenario. Okay, what is actually the threats? But I think that's a separate conversation. We have a podcast on Actor where we talk about that specifically, because people always talk about or ask us, is Actor safe? Is it secure? And we always say it depends on what your threat is. So that's probably like diving too deep. The last point to Actor, the USP, or the unique selling point, to use that phrase, I think is also beyond the functionality level, is really looking at the landscape and seeing that most of the tools and platforms available out there is backed by venture capital, because you need a lot of funding to develop tech that people like and is fast and reliable, and the messages are loading fast, which means that you need to turn to most is turning to the traditional venture capital investor, which then in return wants basically return on the investment, which then drives, okay, what target group are we developing this for? Who has the money? Which drives what features are we developing? Which drives the algorithms that we're using? And that's again why we're seeing civil society is basically left out of the scope, because activism and activists are doing great work, but there's not a lot of money.
Yes.
So we're Actor, we are really focusing on, instead of getting to the trap of suddenly having to develop an app that is trying to make most amount of people spend most amount of time. We're developing Actor to basically have most amount of people spend the least amount of time on our app, basically. So they, in the fastest possible time, can go and know what I need to know today, so I can make kind of the best use of my time, and then close the app so they can be present actually on the street, in the home, with their friends.
That's such an eye-opening kind of views, because what we have experienced is the other way around, which is you're here for the tech, and you basically flip that around, and you're creating a tech that's for the people, which
Yeah.
is amazing.
No, thanks. I mean, I think it's for and also by. I mean, again, everything that we developed so far is really based on, the co-creation process that we're doing. Really trying to understand, okay, what is it that's needed? Yeah, what you're talking about is there's definitely this belief that has been there for long, that that the tech comes first, and then in-person contact is second to that. Where we truly believe that, and it's not just that kind of a fancy quote or like design principle, that we still really believe that the most important and the best way to build relation and all that is in person. Like the in-person just is superior to anything else, but the tech can support, the tools can support those processes, but should always be supportive of that rather than trying to replace that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that obviously touches on a bigger conversation. Okay, like when we look into the future, there's definitely like two camps at least. Where one is around like how can we get most amount of people living through an avatar online, and where the other one is like trying to get back into the in-person communities. But maybe that's something we'll dive into as well.
Actor is such an ideal way of how the future of tech should be. Just say, for example, if you ask someone, well, like me, who how you want to see an ideal technology develop, Actor would be that, right? So tell me a little bit about what are some of the work that you're most proud of, Actor.
Oh, thanks. No one is perfect. There's always challenges, and I think there's always trade-offs to your decision that you're making. One of our challenges is obviously making sure that we can continuously raise enough funds, because we have been offered many times by venture capital previously, if we're willing to go that route. Philanthropic funders that we're supported by in the short term there's not the same culture in giving the amount of funding that you easily can raise to venture capital. I just wanted to be clear that I think I hope and we're seeing that we're doing a lot of things right, but obviously nothing is perfect. But we're working on that, which leads obviously to the things that we have accomplished, I think, so far and achieved, and what we're proud of. I think one of the first thing we did before basically making any line of code was to develop the community around Active. So basically building a coalition where we have a shared sort of belief in that it is possible to develop tech that is responsible and that is movement driven and movement led. And so I think today we have more than 100 organizations that we support and we work together with around the world in more than 16 countries, and several thousand of organizers that is using Actor. And I think the best kind of reward obviously is always that you build something that people are using. That is definitely the biggest reward, and I think continues to drive our motivation is seeing not only people using it now, but seeing, especially in the last 6 months, an increase in the need to divest away from centralized proprietary tech over to alternatives such as Actor. So I think that is definitely one of the things that I'm really proud of, and proud of the team. Now we are like 11 people working this full time in 8 countries, and I think that is also because the people are willing within the team to sacrifice the twice the salary they can get anywhere else. Ultimately, it is definitely the partnership, the community that we have built around Actor to make sure that we develop something that is useful, truly useful, and not just trying to take away their attention from what is going on in front of them.
Earlier in the discussion, we talked about how important social movement is in today's civil society. Why do you think that is, and how does that compare to, say, 50 years ago? I suppose the biggest difference is back then it was more of an in-person kind of connection, and technology has made it somewhat difficult these days. You would think the opposite, but somehow it makes people feel more isolated than ever. And why do you think having this app that supports social movement is so important in today's world?
We cannot be in the same place all the time, right? There's many use cases of the technology in supporting our work as civil society, right? And I think so. One of them is that we cannot be in the same place all the time, which means that the way to obviously be still connected and to work together is using digital tools. And I think second to that, it's also especially with so many things going on. We talked about the public crisis earlier. I think we really have to acknowledge that nothing is kind of siloed, everything is interconnected. So in terms of solidarity work, and not only obviously you need to sometimes spend time on focusing on what you can change, in your local neighborhood, on your street, but sometimes still also show solidarity towards people that are being suppressed in other places on the other side of the world, because your t-shirt is still coming from or there may be still someone that's producing things that you're consuming in Turkey right now, for example, which is also experiencing a big crackdown on civil society. So I think in that way, like the tools are really vital as a way to sound the alarm when things are taking place, because although traditional media is trying to also do, obviously, and for many doing a good job, there's always stories that is not being told. And I think that's really where the platforms have ability to tell the stories, but also enable to muster and gather people to respond to those stories. So I think that's definitely one of the really, I think, really important things. And nothing basically comes without like kind of, again, a trade-off. So as you say as well, like it can also be that people are lured more into digital space and maybe where before there was not many alternatives. So like it's very natural that you became part of like a local community. We haven't had technology as we have now for that long, and it's going so fast, right? It's only in the last kind of 20 years. I can't remember like when the iPhone came out first. So I think it's also very natural that suddenly if you give someone sugar, like for the first time they will eat a lot of it until they kind of like find a balance. And okay, maybe not every day, maybe like on Fridays I can do it. And I think we're looking at society in a high level there, like we definitely have sort of just been in Denmark here, we've just been trying to digitalize everything, like in schools, like all the kids should have a computer, everyone should have a computer. Now they're like, wait, okay, maybe actually, why actually? And suddenly they could see that some of the other, like the relations, the mental well-being suddenly drops. So I think we are definitely a place where we are trying to find that balance as society, but also as a civil society and movements and activists, in how to make sure that they tools remain a service to us and not us being the product.
Yeah, I was chatting with a friend about social media the other day, and the friend said he believes that social media has plateaued, and I thought that was that was kind of a mind blowing to me, because I never thought that it would go away. And there's another report I was reading. A lot of the new generation feel like they wasted a lot of time on social media. I think that, I don't know, it was those who were born in the 90s feel like they wasted so much time on absorbing information that they don't really need. And I think it's a healthy trend, because I do feel like social media just suck away your time. To actually have a technology that helps you to enforce change is an entirely different story, right? So if we can move to kind of your perspective on how online activism or social interaction like would look in an ideal world, or would it be like without censorship or so-called shadow ban some sort?
Just a quick comment to what you said before. It's also written in the white paper that we have available and people can read. Like one of the titles is that the social media, the media part is dead, but being social is not. And I think it's also increasingly what's happening. Not to say that obviously social media is only sort of entertainment, but like, I think to a large degree now, like, you have to look at it more as entertainment rather than necessarily like for where all your friends are, right? Social media, depending on how you define it, it can still be great to receive information, educate yourself. I mean, I've learned a lot of things through YouTube as well, right? But in terms of many of the other platforms, I mean, just the last week I just tried for fun just to scroll through my Facebook feed, just because I haven't done it like in ages, just to see like how the things change. It's literally like yeah, like I mean, it's just entertainment, I would say, right? It's just things that is trying to grab my attention, to click on it, to read on it, but not actually something truly useful. Also because the platform, I think, has grown to suddenly have to be suddenly exposed to so much content that is actually not from the people that you really care about or that you really truly are connected to. And so what does it actually truly give you, right? Beyond just thinking that you're too skinny, that you're too fat, or I probably should have that six pack. Yeah, I think definitely a trend there we see as well. Sort of like the perspective on sort of activism and how it looks into sort of an ideal world. One of the thing again to underpin it is really understanding that the in-person relationship really are the primary, and again that digital presence is secondary and should always be supporting that. Obviously there should not be any, I think, censorship or surveillance. I mean, I think one of the big things that is a discussion point right now and has been for the last couple of years is around encryption, right? And so on one side there is sort of a camp that is talking about we should forbid encryption with the argument that it can and is being used by perpetrators. The other side of that is for some governments, and I think increasingly it's an excuse to always have the ability to look into conversations and to use information against people that is resisting authoritarian regimes. That is definitely one of the big discussion points when it comes to activism and digital tools, if encryption should be allowed or forbidden. Where we definitely are advocating for making sure that people and activists and movements are protected and the messages can be encrypted without any backdoors into it. So I think that's also definitely one thing to have in mind in terms of what's going on in the landscape.
Mm-hmm. This brings me to your white paper publishing 2022. It's been kind of a couple of years, but a lot of things mentioned in the white paper really sound very true still today. In the kind of the declaration that social media is dead, and it feels very up to date, and also the paper was very critical of blockchain technology, but support the cryptography encryption, what you mentioned earlier. So based on all that, I think that's how you came to the conclusion that you want to build actor in a certain way, specifically end-to-end encryption, and building on top of this protocol called Matrix. When I look at it, Matrix protocol is quite interesting. If you can just touch briefly on that and how you see the landscape change over time in the next couple of years.
Thanks for mentioning the white paper, and a big shout out also to Benjamin Kampmann for reading a lot of those parts as well. So I mean, I think in terms of Matrix, and I think maybe just for the listeners right now, I mean, I think to make sure that we don't lose too many by getting too technical or too into decentralized or federated protocols, which to me also like 5 years ago were kind of like, okay, well, what is that? But I think one way to kind of briefly introduce Matrix and the protocol which actors build on, I think is to use a reference that maybe people can relate to, which is that most people have an email account, but we all use different type of email providers. Someone is using Gmail, others are using Proton, others using Microsoft Teams, all different ones. But although we're using different applications or providers, we can still email each other, right? So I can still send an email to someone who has Yahoo or Proton if I'm using Gmail, and vice versa. We're not bound to only send emails with other Gmail users, which is really great. That is not the case for WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram. In those cases, you can only send messages to others that are on Signal or within WhatsApp or Slack or Discord, which really put people into silos, right? And so that is one of the things that the Matrix protocol is solving, that you can actually message anyone using an application that is based on that protocol, which today I think is around 60 million people and increasing. So that is one of the things that protocol is solving. One of the other things is that today, when you choose, WhatsApp or Slack or Discord, you have no decision, or you cannot decide in a way like kind of where your data is stored. Automatically, you just have your data stored on their servers, which means in that sense that it's centralized. Like the data is stored in a central service. Because even though Signal have great encryption, limited metadata, they still have the data stored on centralized server, which out of sort of several things means also it's more volatile to censorship, because you can shut down servers that are essential, not obviously overnight or just like that, but it can be and has also been done. Where with the Matrix protocol, it's decentralized, which means that you can choose where your data is stored, and also you can even host it on your own server. So for some organizations, obviously it's not everyone, they can decide, actually we want to have our own server, and we help them do that, which is easier than it may sound. So that is one of the other things. And all of these things is really a part of, I think, the main common denominator here is really about how do we empower people to have a higher amount of data sovereignty, right? That they are sort of in control of the data, and just because they one day chose actor but in 2 years want to use another application, they're not logged into a new silo and say, sorry, you cannot take your conversation with you because you chose Actor, and this means that you have to close down your account, you have to open all your accounts on another app, but you can actually take them with you, which is, I mean, why not, right? Because it's actually your data. And I think that's one of the things that I think people are starting to realize more and more, especially as people now, following suddenly Elon Musk buying X, and he can do basically whatever he wants to do with it. I mean, imagine how beautiful it would be that you can just say, cool, he's done that, but I'm just going to take my account with me to Blue Sky instead of having to open a new account and lose all my followers and have to rebuild all of my followers. So I think that is one thing that people increasingly, I think we saw a little bit with Mastodon. Mastodon is also kind of a social network that is based on a federated protocol. And I think the challenge still is, I think the same with kind of the whole blockchain technology is, and coming actually also back to the first point, is around usability. It is still sort of like this thing suddenly, just a small thing as introducing that you have to select the server when you sign up is for a lot of people kind of confusing, and also kind of increases potentially like the adoption barrier or limits it, right? When we look ahead is seeing a lot of people working also not only within Matrix, but also other protocol. There's also another protocol called Nostra, really trying to increase the usability so it doesn't become sort of like, yeah, you can choose this thing, but it's really difficult to use. That you can use it and it has the same great user experience, but you have all these other things to it as well, that you actually are in control of your data. And that is obviously what we're trying to work on with Act as well, that it's not something that is a trade-off, but rather, given that, of course, it's based on decentralized protocols, so you're not locked into a new silo, beyond being fully end-to-end encrypted and these things. Mm-hmm. That is very much one of the things looking ahead is bridging that gap between decentralized infrastructure and the user experience. And I think that also speaks into, obviously, one of the barriers for adoption today that we see, which is that, big tech still in many ways has kind of a superior benefit. For example, with WhatsApp comes automatically within a phone plan, right? Or Facebook is free in many countries, right? So for many people, which we don't realize, but in the global south, the global majority countries, Facebook is the internet, right? Because they can access that for free. They don't need to have a data plan to do it. Right. And that is so hard to compete with, because we can say, yeah, but you can use Actor. It's end-to-end encrypted. It's based on a decentralized protocol. It increases your organized capacity. Yeah, but that's great, but like, first of all, like, then I have to install a new app on my phone, but mostly important of all, then I need to buy data, and right now I can use WhatsApp, almost for free, and it takes me nothing. So I think that is also a part of like kind of breaking that almost monopoly in terms of solving that challenge, which is also one of the things with Actor we are working on, sort of also with the Matrix protocol, is enabling basically peer-to-peer organizing, which means that you don't need to rely basically on servers, but you can organize off-grid. So using another type of what's called mesh network to be able to send messages locally by having messages to, without getting too technical, but like mesh together different technologies such as Bluetooth, using local hotspots, and also cellular data to basically having to avoid only using data. So this also applies to, for example, when there's internet shutdowns during protests, then you can still use Actor or Matrix to organize. It's not deployed yet, but something that we definitely are working on.
If I may ask, where you are in the kind of development phase, and where do you see Actor in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, so I think right now Actor in the last kind of year has gone very much from piloting, co-developing with a lot of different movements and organizations to really now having a lot of different movements and organizations rely on Actor as their co-organizing platform or tool, which is really great. So with Actor, what we now are doing is really to use our early adopters to really continue to understand, okay, what are sort of any type of barrier or blocker they're experiencing, to really make sure that we're handling that and not just focusing on scaling as much as we can. Because if we suddenly lure activists onto Actor that are also working in very restricted environments, we don't want to put any lives at risk. So for us now with Actor is really to make sure that we are using the experiences that people now are gathering from using Actor to organize and applying that into our development. So I think in that sense, we are looking into a quite exciting journey for the next couple of years, where we also are increasing our partnerships. So we work directly together with movements, obviously with many different movements, but also then we have our partnerships together with bigger intermediate intermediary organizations, NGOs, who basically are paying Actor to deploy Actor into the ecosystem. So there we help with rollout, we help with support, with training on how to use Actor effectively, which is also part of revenue stream. So if people are thinking about like, but then how do you sustain Actor and how do you avoid not being bankrupt or Actor not being there in 1 year or 2 years, that is a part of the way that we already now are generating revenue. And yeah, like I think to that as well. And when it comes to the services that we're offering additional to Actor, which include not only kind of speaking about obviously the different challenges and security risks that we're sharing on our podcast and newsletter and so on that people can check out. It's also around, again, with Actor, we are like really trying to reimagine digital organizing, because everything is not only happening in chat, it's also enabling you to create up new and sort of more autonomous structures. And with that, we also acknowledge that that we kind of need to co-create that together with the movement. So that's why we have these workshops that we are kind of like are doing, where we are make sure that people also are taking through the features, but also around digital hygiene, right? So what is the best practices? Because I think as what I also learned early on is that digital hygiene is not only, for example, with your oral hygiene, if you don't brush your teeth, my teeth will rot or they will go away at some point. I'm the only one that's impacted by that. Where with digital hygiene, if I'm not kind of being, if I basically have weak passwords or I don't take care of that, I can also put other people at risk. Right? So that's certainly not only me; it's also my peers in the movement that I put at risk. So all these things we are trying to look at more holistically, rather than just building an app and say, here you go, go out and use it. It's also like really trying to understand how do we bring sort of education with that.
What are some of the partnerships that you can share? Any partnership names that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we work with different ones that include like Civicus being one partner who has I think 15,000 members. They're supporting many amazing organizations around the world fighting for freedom of peaceful assembly rights, LGBTQ rights. We also work together with Action in Denmark, which also supports movements around the world, and also consortiums. We also have one of our networks that's been here for, I think, since the beginning almost, is the Ocean Network, or kind of a network of ocean scientists that basically is coordinating science and insights across the world. And I mean, even they are also impacted by, for example, the new administration, where in the US, because a lot of data is suddenly being deleted about protective ecosystems, and suddenly they're just right now working to be part of our also supporting saving that data. Demonstrate that we work with not only one type of partnership, but both ones that are supporting bigger ecosystems within civil society or human rights, and then others who are working or supporting movements within ocean science and conservation. Again, come back to it's not only one type of user that we support. But I think also as a last note to that, especially after we, not only with the election of Trump and as new administration, but also obviously like big tech kind of crawling up to kiss the ring, all the big ones, Amazon, Google, Meta. We again, coming back into what I said in the beginning, we really do see a really big shift in our movements saying, okay, we need to choose alternative. And also when you speak about, okay, how is a trajectory looking, it's really focusing, okay, how do you enable a lot of people to make that shift over, and not even only try to make them select Actor. I mean, for us, for me personally, also, it's just as much trying to make them choose something that at least maybe based on a decentralized, structure that is secure, and whether they choose Actor or Element, which is another Matrix app. I mean, I think that is the bigger win, is that we're kind of together are working in this ecosystem. All of us that is working alternatives are working together towards that. So I think that is also, I want to say fight that's going on, but like kind of a lot of work that's going into that, and how to actually enable people to make that switch. So that's also why we see a lot of movements that works within sort of youth engagement. We have movements that work with sort of like gun violence and others as well. So just generally see a lot of interest in a need for movements to find better and more secure digital homes.
My last question, what kind of advice do you have for those who are looking to reimagine activism, social movement in terms of progress?
A couple of things come to mind. Focusing on how to build sustainable structures, right? So, and what what I mean by that is, especially as I think I also mentioned earlier, is it's around building structures that allow for movements not to only either rely on a couple of individuals, but really create structures that again enable basically to have a centralized plan and decentralized action. So create processes that like understand not only how do we get a lot of people to like our post or sign a petition, but how do we actually get them engaged in the movement? And I think also to kind of avoid burnout, because again, it is such a massive issue within sort of civil society, is people just burning out, because activism is also really value driven, right? It's something that you truly believe in, so you're willing to do so much, and sometimes everything seems very, very urgent, which it also can be. But ultimately, if you're sacrificing your health for it, you cannot be in the long run. Focusing on that, I think, is as one thing is really important. And maybe second to that also, and connected, is to be open to kind of then also challenge the status quo. Because I think a lot of the movements are working on changing the system, whether that's how we measure growth, how we measure success. And I think as long as we still rely on system that kind of is based on those values with big tech and the platforms, it's harder to break free from. And I think that's one of the things that we as civil society need to figure out. How do we, obviously without sort of like putting anyone at risk, but like how do we together reimagine that and are open for things instead of like remaining, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So we acknowledge that it's not every movement that is ready to move on to Actor yet, but what we're focusing on, who we're focusing on, that we're seeing using Actor now, is those say, like, we really need to change the way that we think about our organizing, especially digital organizing, and how the tools that we are choosing as our infrastructure is supporting that. Yeah, and then I think maybe one of the last thing also, especially for movements that work in more restricted environments, is around, again, the digital hygiene. Remember that it's a common effort. You're not more secure than, quote unquote, the weakest link. So make sure that it's not only about you're being hacked and viewed and displayed, but it's also about your friend being compromised, maybe going to jail or even worse. So I think that is beyond sort of the organizing and structures point around those. It's also just the last point around the digital hygiene and safety as well. I think especially as we see kind of like, sorry to interrupt, but just I think especially as we see more and more who is cracking down, on activists, both not only the US, where there's laws that is being tried to apply to NGOs and labeling them as terrorist organization, but also in the UK, where like there has been historic in the last year, like sentences to non-violent direct action movements and activists for doing civil disobedience. There was like a case where there was 4 or 5 people that together got 20 years of prison time. It is increasingly important to be aware of to keep up the fight and resistance.
Thank you. So for those who are interested in what Actor is doing, should they check out your website, and the podcast as well?
Yeah, don't do that. No, of course. Don't check out our website. No, definitely have a look at our website. Websites can always be improved. I think it should be mobile responsive by now. We don't focus a lot on the website. We focus all our time on the app. So no, definitely check out the website. It's actor.global. There we have link to our podcast. We have a mini series there hosted by Joe and Ben, my 2 great colleagues. The mini series I think it's called Shit Hit the Fan, but it's really just, I think it's 20-minute episodes, really hands-on how to increase your digital security. There's a couple of notes around WhatsApp, Signal. There's a newsletter you can sign up to where we share some good stuff, and obviously also a link to the Actor app. So either do that or go straight to your app platform where you're on Android, iOS, and download the app, check it out. There should be a default invite code that you can use called organize with a set, which adds you to our community space, so you can get a bit of feeling what Actor can do. And otherwise, obviously also feel free just to reach out directly to the team at hello@actor.global, or I think you can even also just add my email in there as well. Let's see how many I get, but Emil, EMIL @actor.global. We're also on LinkedIn somewhere and Blue Sky, but maybe we can add that in the show notes.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you, Mel. Thank you so much for your insight and time.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you for doing this work, and thanks to everyone listening. I hope it was insightful, and looking forward to hear any questions, thoughts, or feedback or reflections from you. Thanks a lot.
What was the most fascinating aspect of today's conversation for you? Personally, I was inspired by emerging movement of technologies that are truly designed for their users. Federated protocols like Mastodon, Matrix, Actor, being prime examples. As Emil mentioned, imagine a day where we can take our data, our followers, to any platforms we choose. How liberating that would be. Technologies like Actor aren't designed to hijack your attention. They are built to support users' genuine needs and intentions. This approach embodies Progress Reimagined's core mission, which is to highlight technologies that put humanity first. While Actor represents an excellent human-centered technology, many others deserve recognition. Do you know of similar initiatives? If so, I'd love to feature them on a future episode. Please reach out at progressreimagined@proton.me with your suggestion. If you found value in today's discussion, please share it with a friend or leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, this is Kathleen Chu from Progress Reimagined.